And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. It is just beautiful here today. I'm so happy. I've been talking to my friends back east, and I think you've had a little more weather than we have. But our special guest here today is also from California, so we're both enjoying a delightful spring.
You guys got lucky. I had a client come back from Southern California yesterday. I saw him this morning. He said, "Oh, it was gorgeous, beautiful the whole time." Oh, hush up. Hush up. Although we shouldn't complain. We're getting some rain right now, but this weekend's supposed to be beautiful and 70 degrees. So it's sort of okay. We're starting to get a little bit of spring going. So that's great. And as Nora just mentioned, we do have a special guest today. I'll let her do the official introduction in just a minute. Before we do that, though, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. Like, follow, share, do all of the things because it really helps us out and it helps us bring more guests that hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation too and people that we really want to talk with. So we really appreciate that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do it through our Instagram account through Moving Convos or movingconvos@gmail.com. Best way to get in touch with us. And without any further ado, I'm going to have Nora get on with the introduction.
All right. So today we have as a special guest Ann Bishop, who is another local-ish Californian, Northern Californian, who I first met at a POT and then at PMA. And she has a very research-oriented background, a very scientific background, which is what we always love on this show. And her particular topic that we wanted to talk about today was really the brain-body connection, brain-mind connection, and how we use that kind of neurology, if you will, to do better cueing, more effective coaching, how we access the nervous system kind of through the brain. Again, a lot of us do that very intuitively, but maybe or maybe not as effectively as we could. So we wanted to bring Ann on and see if we can get a little more detail about, a little more specifics about what might help with that. So welcome, Ann Bishop.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Nora. So thrilled to be invited onto this podcast. And thank you to all the listeners who will enjoy this.
So tell us a little bit, Ann. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm excited about this because this is something that we've really not discussed a whole lot of. We've talked a lot about everything from imagery with cueing and things about intention, but we've never really done much of a deep dive into sort of the neurology behind it or that portion of it. So I'm really looking forward to today. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about yourself, as Nora just said, because I just want to say I'm excited.
Right. Well, wonderful. Of course. So I started Pilates way back in 2001. And I started my first experience with Pilates was actually at UC Irvine. I was studying dance there and biology. And then, like many a story, I think my story is rather cliche in the Pilates world. I had an injury and was then introduced to Pilates. And my home base is Northern California, so about an hour's north or 45 minutes north of San Francisco. And I was lucky enough to meet a woman who essentially mentored me in Pilates when I was about 20. And so this was 21. This was in the year 2000, 2001. And I am forever grateful for that mentorship. It was a really beautiful experience. Her name is Connelly Weinberg. She now teaches work called Scalifa, which is all about connecting your brain and mind to your skeleton, but particularly starts now with the vertebrae. But back when I first worked with her, I was working with her as a Pilates instructor. And looking back, she was really a body whisperer. I use that term as someone who, can look at a body and just really teach it so well and meet you where you're at. And because I had a science background, she got me all into the anatomy and all of that. And so I remember, coloring books and trying to learn because I just kind of stepped out of college. So I was really into into the college aspect there. And I just had a great experience with her. and then at one point I said, well, I should maybe get a job at a dance studio at a front desk or something. And I put on there that I knew Pilates at the last note. And they said, well, you teach. And I go, well, I don't know how to teach. But it was a mat class. And then my mentor, Connelly Weinberg, she sort of taught me, prepared me to teach a Pilates mat class. At that point, I'd been, coming to her twice a week. We had set up a great relationship where if I cleaned her bathroom, I could pay her less to come. Because I didn't have, I was like, I had a lot of money. And I was just like a sponge. Like, she'd call me that a lot. You're a sponge. I just needed that to hold on to that learning. And so I say this story because that experience of teacher, student, mentor, mentee was really a part of how I started in the world of Pilates. And later on, I actually got trained with Stott. And then later, no one, as we know during that time, people didn't know what Pilates was. You might have to describe it. So there, today it's, ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's just great. Joseph Pilates would be happy. But, back then, and so I opened a studio by chance. I wasn't really meaning to be an entrepreneur, but I became one at 23. And then just went really far into the learning of Pilates. But I reconnected with my mentor, and she was working with some synchronized swimmers for the 2008 Olympics. And they were, I'm forgetting their first names, but it was Vanderblock. And I went up and helped her train them so that they could perform well. And we were teaching them this new movement that she'd come up with, which is now called Scalitha. I think prior it was called Mindful Spine. And it was at that moment, this was like 08, 09, where I said, she kept saying, it's the brain. We're accessing the brain here. And I said, you're right. We're not to get people to move in such a detailed way, or when you're really teaching people to move, because at this point, people were just like, oh, train the body, train the muscles, train the bones. That's where the industry was. That's just where it was. We didn't know about fascia. It wasn't even on few people did. I certainly didn't at that stage of my career. And so at that point I said, yeah, it is the brain. So how can I learn more about the brain and movement and education? And so that's when I went off to get my master's degree in a program called Mind, Brain, and Education. And I learned all about, the mind, and I dove much deeper into neuroscience and pedagogy, and then while I was in graduate school, I created the company Body Brain Connect to reciprocally connect brain research with movement practice. So it's not always top down. It's not always the research dictates. It's gonna have a feeling it's not that. It's the experience of the teaching can also influence the research, and that I hold so deep to my heart, because we have to work together, just like mind and brain and body and mind.
It's also I always say, without the experience, you don't have the hypothesis to then do the research. I mean, I've long thought in terms of research that, you have to have the experience and enough of it to go, oh, this is the question I want to answer, because I've had enough experience to recognize the question. And then you can start to do the research. And then hopefully the research will then inform practice. But it's always a circular loop, in my opinion. It does not, research can't happen in a vacuum. Research happens because it bubbles up out of experience. Hopefully then it gets done well, and then it can feed back into experience. I mean, that's how I like to think about it.
Yeah, me too. Yes. And I think good researchers think that way too. It's just, but sometimes, there's a disconnect, but you can find people who want to meet in the middle. And I think that's really the sweet spot.
So, you got into this brain body connect. It sounds like this was really the path you were on from the beginning with the teacher that you had.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how, like what you learned, like how the brain does influence movement practice and movement teaching.
Yes. So, so at the time I learned about the brain, we knew a lot about, genetics was very popular and I'm bringing this up because everything informs each other, right? And there's no one answer, right? The brain is a piece, fascia is a piece, muscles are even a piece, bones are a piece.
Yeah.
The
it all
nervous
works together.
system is a piece, right? It's multiple systems interacting. And so my struggle was I would work with clients. I primarily worked with clients in a one-on-one setting or semi-privates. And I primarily worked with clients who had pain, because I started Pilates in pain. And it was my desire to stop my pain that was my drive, a deep drive for me. And, what I learned was, as I said, why is it that I can have a client come in the door and they can present with essentially the same problem, and one person can hear and respond to my cues and another person can't? And I'm a big person who used a lot of educational props. So I brought mine today. I don't have I don't have my studio anymore, but I brought my brain, right? I am someone who likes to have props. So in my studio, I had, I love how, Brian, you and your background, you have the image of the skeleton and you've got the muscles there. I was always pulling out these props. And of course I was using imagery and metaphor. And I think I just was like, what is it? What is going on? And because I worked with people in pain, I knew that I had enough of a sense, honestly, of hospitality to make people feel comfortable when they walked in. I knew that without understanding the concept of dysregulation or the concept of although I did start to learn about fear and how fear impacts, but that I need to make essentially, and this concept of safety, but I was essentially making people feel safe. Even like you were said at the beginning of the call, many of us are already intuitively doing things that are based in biology that we later, emerge from the science. And so I found that, how can I make people feel safe and give them a cue that allows their body to react or to respond? And a couple of the things that I've found for sure is this concept of goal, and then also this concept of intention. And so I'm thinking that these two terms are actually the same. I was having a discussion with someone about this the other day. The brain responds best to goal-directed movement. And our brain is really responsible for our movement planning. And our brain is responsible for error detection. So if you've got a compensation pattern going on, which I usually find is either the result or the consequence of pain, somewhere in that pain, the compensation pattern is causing pain. So your brain has to detect the error of that compensation pattern and then feel safe enough with the relationship with the teacher to make a change. And so when I was studying, there wasn't the concept yet of the polyvagal theory. That had not yet come to pass. But what did come to pass was we were talking a lot about mirror neurons, and the concept that when someone is goal-directed, we will understand what they mean through their mirror neurons, and our body will want to imitate. And that is very consequential in teaching, right?
Yeah.
Is that so many times, whether you're literally showing a movement, it could be as simple as that, but it's a little more precise. What I learned that I really changed my teaching to say, whenever I'm doing a visual demonstration, I want to articulate the goal to the client while I'm giving the visual demonstration so that the mirror neuron will, do its job in both the teacher and the learner. So that's one piece that I really was one of the big first pieces I took away from some of this work.
So, okay, so mirror neurons, right? Let's just start with the concept of mirror neurons, because how I see that, and feel free to correct me, absolutely, is and I know this just from teaching, that if I'm really clear about what I want that client to do, like my intention is really clear and my goal is really clear for them, and I articulate it in a reasonably accurate way, and sometimes even if I don't, like I find if my intention is clear, even if my language is kind of wacky, like I say elbow instead of knee or something like that, I get the result I want, which is weird, but that's happened, every now and then in the afternoon, I get a little body part dyslexic, and I find it doesn't matter as long as my intention is clear, the client gets it anyway. Is that kind of how you describe mirror neurons? Or I'm sure there's more sophistication than that, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're neurons that are in what are, in our brain near our parietal lobe, and they're very involved in understanding the intention and the goal of other people's movements. And they were first discovered actually in monkeys, where they were trying to figure out, does the monkey understand what I'm doing? And so, they do this with monkeys because they're putting electrodes on brains. Yeah. They're not doing this on humans. And what they're finding is that, the monkey would understand the goal of eating, even so its neuron would fire when you would eat, and it would be like, oh, I'm eating. Then they'd put up a sheet, so it couldn't see, and they would make it so that it could hear the sound of the eating. And because the monkey was able to understand movement, whether it saw it or heard it, because it understood the goal. So it's not a mirror because of sight. It's a mirror because of goal. Yeah. And so with babies, they don't always understand language, but they're constantly using mirror neurons because they're just copying their, whoever their adult is in their life. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest things when I came back and began teaching again, is because I remember when I first started teaching as a student teacher, I think at one point before my STOT exam, they're like, well, you really should know the goal of every exercise. And as a new teacher with a giant, book, I was like, I don't know. I'm just trying to remember the setup and what springs to use. I was like, and now it's once you teach for a while, you do know the goal of every exercise, and the goal of the exercise changes for each person. I mean, you can teach the same exercise to the same person and the goal can be totally different. Right. Yeah. So I really started to filter my teaching through that. And it made a huge difference in getting my clients to move in such a way that they could make the change. Yeah. Yeah. So that was number one. I've got another one, but I want to let me know what else questions you have.
I find that fascinating. In working with clients, I work with clients every day. That's my primary focus. And like you, it's mostly people in pain. 95% of the people I work with, orthopedic or some kind of condition, often chronic pain. And what I found interesting is when you said one of the first things is when they feel safe. Providing that safe space. Yesterday, I was working with a client and we were working on some neck stuff, and all her life, she had a neck injury, she said 25 years ago, but she's always had issues and she was scared to do anything. So even allowing me to have her do, because she was moving very robotically, she just got back from surgery, so she was moving very robotically. So I was like, okay, I just need you to loosen your neck a little bit and let's just start some gentle movement. And believe it or not, you could see the fear, but you could also see it's begin to fade as she started moving and she felt safe. She knew that I was there. We only did a couple of repetitions, what she felt she could do, but to build that safe space. Now she and I have built that safe space over the last, so she knew she could trust me.
Yeah, it
But
takes a
really,
while.
that safe, it does.
Mhm. Mhm.
It takes a long time, especially for people in chronic pain, because they hold on to that. Because, she and I actually had a conversation about that. I said, sometimes we hold on to it because it's familiar. We know what it is. We know where it lives. And sometimes we're afraid to let it go. And sometimes just realizing that can create a shift in them and in their brain. I've seen it visually, that all of a sudden you could see their body relax. You could see their eyes relax and their body starts moving a little bit more normally. And sometimes it just takes that small little change so that they do feel safe and that I am listening and that I am there with them on this journey, even though they're the only ones experiencing the discomfort or pain or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're able to support her in that journey. Yeah. I think so. What you're describing, and I love that you brought this up, is that let's say like we know mirror neurons and it's like, okay, I've got a goal for this client. Maybe she's further along, she's relaxed a bit, or, somewhere farther along where you're sort of getting into some movement and you're articulating it. And you have another client with a similar issue and you articulate to them and they get it. And this client still doesn't. And you're like, I said the goal. Like you checked all the boxes.
You did all the things.
You did all the things. Like you threw the kitchen sink. Like you did everything. And what I love is that it's not just mirror neurons. There's this concept that's there, and it is called the smoke around mirror neurons. And the smoke around mirror neurons could be fear. So you can't see, you literally can't comprehend, or the fear is stopping you from processing the safety of or the information that you're describing, because they still don't feel safe. And it may have nothing to do with you. And, the person helping them feel better. It could be because they had a bad night of sleep. It could be because they had an argument that morning. I mean, who knows? The body, I don't think, cares. It's just dysregulated. It's just not feeling good. It doesn't care what prompted it. And so the smoke around mirror neurons could be, racism. It could be sexism. It could be anything that is, allowing us to not feel safe. It could be a cultural barrier. It could be a language barrier. So I really like that, because that concept of mirror neurons and information and describing lays very well on top of sort of like the polyvagal theory and this concept of dysregulation and, and not feeling safe. So I think it's good when you have sort of two different systems or concepts that you can think about and work on, and, well, why is one working and why is it? So I think many times we just have to think, like, if you've come to a challenge with a client and you're just like, you've been doing, you're confident in your work, you've been doing it a long time and they're still struggling. It's just, and we can stay in our lanes, but we can still have conversations as educators, like, hey, or, practitioners or things like that. What has come up from you? Why is there a challenge maybe in why you're not hearing what I'm saying? Although I wouldn't say it like that. I know that I come up with some beautiful way to say it. For whatever reason, I'm not coming up with a good way now. But, just to try to be like, oh, well, did you sleep well? Or are you stressed in some way? Maybe it's a harder day for you to integrate this knowledge. That'd probably be a better way to say it.
Well, I think we all want to go through that, though, that some days you're just not present. You're not present in the moment, or you're not hearing the person, what they're saying to you. I think we all get that way. And there is a time and a place to call them out on it gently.
Yeah.
To make them aware of what you're feeling from the conversation. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but someone's in a bad mood and they don't even realize they're taking it out on you at the moment. And they're just they're not venting, but you can feel that, I call it pissed mist, where that energy in the room is just there and you're just like, there's an ickiness in the room, and they're letting you have it without saying a word. But what you're saying to them is up against the wall. It's being blocked and not getting in. But sometimes just gently saying, man, it seems, trying to break through in some way. It seems like today's been kind of a rough one for you, I think. Something gentle that lets them know that you're on their side, that they can let the wall down a little bit and say, yeah, it really has been. Say, yeah, I can kind of feel that today. I'm sorry for you for that. And then sometimes just admitting it, you can break through, and then they can change, and you can feel that change physically. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
I love the concept of pissed mist. I think that's hilarious. And it goes right along with this kind of smoke around the mirror neurons, right? I love that. I think that's a very accurate way to describe that. The blockages that we put in our own way, really. Again, by our emotions, by fear, by whatever negative things we're latching onto at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
I would add, like, sometimes people put them in our way. So
absolutely.
Like, if ever,
no question.
I mean, I know many of us have probably worked with people who come to us because they've had an experience of gaslighting or something within the industry, right?
Yes.
Like in the medical industry, like people,
yes.
I mean, I worked with so many people who had poor outcomes with allopathic medicine, right? And so that's why they're here, right? Because they couldn't find that answer. So yes, it's sometimes on them, but sometimes there are, I think, structural things that have happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And just that, I mean, so many of my clients, like both of yours, were chronic pain clients of various kinds, and they'd been through 17 different practitioners and, had some results here, some results there, or else no results anywhere. And then they come to you. It's kind of like, great, I'm a Pilates teacher and I'm your last hope. Like, that's why am I your last hope? I'm a Pilates teacher.
Fix me.
Right. But there's advantages to that relationship, which I think also get a little bit to the body-brain connect, which is many medical practitioners have 15 minutes with a client. Yeah. And they've got 27 clients they're seeing every day, or whatever the situation is, and they're going to see them once every year or every 6 months, right? And there really is something profound about us being able to see somebody once or twice a week over an extended period of time and really get to know them, because I certainly have had many clients, and I'm sure you guys have as well, where you weren't even able to kind of get to a good communication pattern until you'd been with them a little while. Like, it just took a while to kind of get the communication going between the two of you in a way that was successful and effective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say another thing that has really come across for me with thinking about the brain and thinking about how we communicate movement and learning is, really, are people perceiving their bodies?
Yes.
They're a felt sense. Yeah. And I feel like there still isn't a body sensor yet that tracks that, but I'm waiting for that. Like, what can track your body awareness? Because, our body awareness is not always accurate. It can be off.
Yeah.
And I remember people would come in and they would say, well, how long is it going to take me to, get my, and I'd be like, basically, in my mind, I would say, well, how good are you at body awareness? Or how good are you at taking a cue, feeling the change, and executing that change? Because that is going to determine how quickly you can start doing advanced Pilates or whatever it is we want to do here. And so, a lot of times after I studied the brain, I really realized, I'm not just teaching the body, I'm teaching the brain. And, why are we so tired at the end of the day? Well, we're not, when you're teaching all day, right? You're not just teaching the body in front of you, you're teaching the whole person in front of you, which is an embodied brain, which sounds like, oh, it's so complex and then it's so hard, but really it's not. It's just an opportunity for even more ways to access and create change in that person. So, again, like, I love the concept of using props and visuals when we teach. So, even if you have images like, hey, when you're coming in and I'm working on your body and you're in this body space, it's not just your body, your brain is responding, your nervous system is responding. And I think, sort of retooling that concept of, teach the body in front of you, because we are whole beings. And so I think one of the things that we know about education is that if you can't perceive something, then you can't make a change. And so people perceive things in different ways. Again, this would go back to like your cueing. Are you perceiving, do you have a kinesthetic sense? Can you feel the sense of weight in your sit bones, in your feet? We go through that. Or can you feel a sense of warm or cold? Or can you feel, a sense of balance? So all of this sort of comes together. And it's for me, I found that I could get the best results in clients when I could teach them to feel their bodies, because then and a lot of times, and I learned this through Connelly Weinberg, I'll bring her back up, but then also just through my own knowledge of education, is like, if you can provide someone with a compare and contrast experience, and as long as it's safe, the whatever not great experience you want them to feel, but as long as it is, great, because then they can replicate that experience at home or out in the wild, right? Beyond our eyes, beyond our studios, because that was another challenge I saw, is that people, with not only within myself, but with the clients I worked with, is that they could execute really amazing work, hard moves within the confines of the studio, but then at home, they wouldn't do their exercises or something. And so how do we get people to do that? And I felt that anytime you can give how does your body feel? And I think, when you've practiced this breath, or even Brian, like when you described your client coming in and how, just having her just take a few breaths and then, now move. And how does that feel before you moved? Right. So that's an easy compare and contrast. So I find that our movement learning mechanism and our brain learns very well when we can set that up for clients. And I have used that a lot throughout my career.
Well, I think that's the carrot stick thought, isn't it? Sort of you give them a positive experience, and they can really replicate that on their own when they have something to anchor it to. You give them that reward of feeling better, or feeling better movement, or throughout the day or something. And you can really take that and get them to be more compliant with their exercises, or be, more mindful of how they're moving their body in space, because they have that reward of getting to the other side and being, even it was only, I had no pain for 6 hours afterwards.
Yeah.
You can really say, okay, yes, that's awesome. If you continue on with this, hopefully you'll get that even more. That client I was mentioning, she has a routine that she does every single night. Now, do I believe that she needs that every single night of her life in order to feel good? Probably not. But you know what? For her, she believes that it helps. She does the same routine. And even if it's working psychologically on her, I'm thrilled to pieces, because she says it keeps her pain level down to a manageable level. So for her, she really gets that reward complex in herself, that yes, I'm doing something. And it makes her feel good because she's able to do something for herself and not be so reliant on everybody else.
Which is fabulous. And like to wrap a little bit of that up, I always say, if you can't feel it, you can't change it. Right.
Absolutely.
That's just the truth of that. But I think what both you guys are saying, which I love, is once they have that positive experience, and I often say it's like, until they've felt that something can be different, they have absolutely no faith or belief or understanding of what that could be.
Absolutely.
Right. So much of what we ideally try to do is give them a positive movement experience in whatever issue they're having. It's like, oh, I could do that. I can do this and it doesn't hurt. And then it's like, okay, so how did I get there? Because again, until they've felt the destination, if you will, they're in a forest with no pathway.
Yes.
Right. They've got to actually have the experience to go, oh, okay, that's the experience I'm trying to get. Let's see if I can find my way to that on my own, ideally. right?
And what I'm so curious about is that if you're working with someone with a pain experience or you're in your own, it's so interesting to me that why is it so hard to sometimes find the path out on your own
Yeah. Yes.
without that first felt positive experience? And if you go back to the concept of when you're in a pain experience, if you're more in a sense of fear, you're less curious, you sort of stick with what you know, you know, your whole visual field, it's like everything shrinks, your whole world shrinks. I'm just, because I don't know why that is. That's been my experience with myself and also working with clients, is it's hard for them to find. That's why they're coming to us, because for whatever reason, their body can't always find the way out to a positive movement experience. But maybe, I don't know, what's been your experience with that? Have you seen people find their own way out, or have you found your own way out of a painful experience?
I mean, I'm thinking of two things. I'm thinking of one client, or one friend of mine actually, who has long COVID and has had just a horrific time in the last period of time, and it's coming with the fatigue and the really severe myofascial pain. So both those things come together, and she said something which is really true. This is an ex-dancer, very big mover, Pilates teacher, and she's like, the fear. Right? The fear is so profound that every single part of her brain says, just don't do anything. Right? Like, just stop. And I think the first reaction to pain for most of us is to stop moving. We've sent so many clients, like they don't move their leg, they don't move their back, they stop. And I think, I certainly know, and with myself, it's like, I don't take that approach. I'm like, okay, well, that's bothering me. So let me try to move it, and let me see what movement might make it feel better. So again, just because of how I've always worked on my own body, that usually works better than not moving it. But that's not natural. That was learned on my part. And it took a bit to go, okay, that hurts. All right, well, let's see, if I move it a bit or rub it a bit or I do a little something, it feels better, right? And that's again, most clients, that's not their experience. They hurt, and therefore they stop doing whatever they're doing. And oftentimes that leads to ingraining that pain pattern in the body. Right? Because deconditioning and everything else doesn't often help a lot of myofascial or orthopedic pain issues, right?
I actually had a client tell me that today. He's been having knee problems off and on, and I've helped him, in a huge amount, regain his, function. And he went on a trip, and he said, the worst thing for me is not moving. Yeah. He said, exercise is the one thing that makes things feel better. But again, when he first came, it was like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be. I said, let's find what doesn't hurt to move.
Yeah.
Let's work with that first and find that. And once we got that, it was, oh, okay. So when he took this trip, he made sure he went down, he got on the recumbent bike, and he said anything to get some movement.
Yeah.
And he said, and it always felt better afterward. I said, exactly. So it was changing that mindset of don't move to I have to move this to make it feel better.
Mm-hmm. And then finding the dosage, right? Because I've also worked with high-level athletes and dancers who are like, well, if this hurts, I'm just going to keep doing more and more about this. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But, sometimes they just cause more damage in that process. So it's, there's also that mindset. So you've got to go either way on that mindset.
Yeah.
So, Anne, I have another question for you. What is polyvagal theory? This is one of those things that's tossed around all the time. And I'm like, okay, for our readers and for myself, for our listeners and for myself, what does that mean?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yes. So I was introduced to polyvagal theory by Chantal Lopez, and who I think she was introduced to it by Wendy Arbuckle.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's sort of believe how it was passed down. That's a theory that was developed by a man named Stephen Porges, and it's a concept that we have something called our vagus nerve that travels down through our don't remember if it's a cranial nerve or not, but it travels down and it goes all the way into our body. It innervates our heart, it innervates our diaphragm, it innervates our gut. Some people think it goes all the way down. And the interesting thing about the vagus nerve is it's primarily sensory. So it's really bringing information back up to us about our body. And it's really sensing our autonomic nervous system, which controls our heart rate and our gut and our breathing. And for me, I think it's an important concept when we talk about teaching safety to people. So the vagus nerve is essentially sort of scanning the sensory information coming up from our body. Am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe? And so if you are not feeling safe, you may do something like retreat. You may do something, you essentially go into a concept called dysregulation, and then there's a concept called regulation and joy. So in terms of how this applies to working with bodies, I believe that, it's definitely like in my opinion, maybe it's the algorithm, but it's like a trending topic, like fascia.
Yeah, exactly. That's why.
Absolutely.
The brain was, and then the genetics, like I've kind of seen like genetics was early 2000. I feel like the brain, there was the decade of the brain, which was the 2010s. Then fascia came in. Now we're sort of and everyone has a piece. And I think clinically, polyvagal theory is great. There is some pushback scientifically on some of it specifically, but I do think that clinically it allows someone to say, hey, this person is in a dysregulated state, meaning it's going to be harder for them to hear what I'm saying, whether it's so because people can come in with the same problem with their body, but then have very different outcomes, right? Where someone will get into a chronic pain on someone, or just kind of, it's just harder and takes longer. And some person's like, whoop, bouncing back, right? We might never even see the people who bounce back because they don't need to come to us, right? There's a whole population that we never see, right? So for me, it allows people who are teaching and working with bodies to say, hey, this person is coming in pretty dysregulated. How can I bring them to regulation? One way to do that is with breath. So, hey, there's breath work across, multiple, whether it's yoga breathing or Pilates breathing or just deep diaphragmatic breathing. I think there's a concept called sounding, or humming or singing can, activate it activates or stimulates or tones the vagus nerve within the throat. And so those are some ways in which you can support vagal health. Yeah.
So
and just become aware that it's a thing, like, hey, this could be what's going on. But yes, go ahead.
So I think of, so the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve, by the way. It's a 10th cranial nerve.
Thank you. That's what I thought. It's the 10th cranial nerve.
It's a cranial nerve. I'm like, okay. The other thing that I think about here is just there's this concept too, which is popping up, interoception.
Yes.
As opposed to proprioception. And interoception is essentially that internal sense of like hunger and thirst and cold and hot and emotions, like all come through interoception. Like that's one way of thinking about it. And a lot of that is coming from the vagus nerve, right? Or at least that's part of that. It's part of that system.
Yes, and it's processed in a part of the brain called the insula, which is like if you were to kind of pull apart your brain, it's like deep in there. And at the front of the insula is the amygdala. And the amygdala is our fear response center. And so our sense of emotions is also, very targeted by the insula. So, and the amygdala, which is an almond-shaped section of the brain. I did a course about interoception way back in 2011, probably, or 2013. But it is a great concept because it's like you use distinctly different parts of your brain when you're trying to understand where is the weight of my sit bone or my heels versus how am I feeling today?
Yeah.
And the interoception is insula. The where is my weight happening in my body is more parietal lobe. So this brings it back to when you ask people to sense, in my opinion, I feel like you're training their brains. And I feel
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, but there hasn't been a ton of research to show that sensory input training improves neuroplasticity. At least I haven't put that into Google Scholar yet, but I'd be curious, right? There's, a lot of information in fitness. Well, cardio is good, strength training is good. I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop of like sensory input is good, right? And here's all the research behind it. Because so when we come into people, we're not just training their bodies, we're retraining their brains, or we're retraining their nervous system. So it is a whole person experience, and that just makes me love teaching that much more.
We talk about the mind-body connection all the time, right? Mindful movement and on all those things, body-brain connect, right? As you have up on your screen there. And it's kind of like that's I think is where we know the most effective teaching happens, right? Because in order to change a movement pattern, you have to change something about the motor control in the body, in the brain, right? It's not just about the muscle doing something different. The muscle doesn't do something different unless the brain tells it to.
Right.
Yeah. And so combining that idea of the sensory input, the verbalization or the educational input, the experience, the felt sense, right? That's really where change happens. If you can get those pieces to line up, and sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't for whatever reason, or you can't at that moment or with that client or with that area.
Yeah, or in that time. I think too, as I was sort of thinking last night, I was thinking about preparing for this podcast. I was thinking about, we talk about developing our eye, right?
Yeah.
And it takes time. It does not happen overnight.
No.
And you're like, okay. And I remember so clearly, like, somebody coming up in front of our Stop Pilates class. This was like 2002 in Toronto, and the classes were huge. There were like 20 people, and they would put somebody up there and be like, look at their posture. Can't you see that the rib? And I was like, I can't see that the rib.
No.
I don't. And they're like, well, it'll just take time. And I think I felt frustrated by that. I was like, I don't want you to tell me it just takes time. Show me a methodology or system so that I see what you're seeing.
Right.
And I think over time, really trying to see the bones and the muscles underneath the skin could have been like a way in which someone could have said, this is what ultimately, but first you got to have that image of a skeleton underneath the skin and underneath the muscles and anything that's happened to that body over time, surgeries, scars, pregnancies, whatever. Right. And so, but you can't see the brain, right?
Right.
I cannot see that your myelinated sheaths have improved and now you're so much better at footwork. I'm not going to see that, right? I'm just going to see that you're better at footwork. And what I love about integrating, thinking about the brain when we're teaching movement is that the ways in which you can think about the brain changing is, again, is really just in the behaviors that are exhibited by the client. And those behaviors could be better performance, like now you're doing teaser in the box and you could never do that before. Or the behavior is you're coming in with, what was it, piss mist today, right? It's like you have all these behaviors and they are emotional and they are physical. And I think it makes, teaching that much more interesting to be like, how am I changing the brain? Because I can't see the changes in the brain. All I can really see is the outcome. So how can I make the outcome other than the performance improvement or however? doing that.
I have this funny image because I've thought about this a lot. It's like, the neurology is happening, the brain is involved. And in the image I have is like the brain is like the puppet master,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you see, right? Like if I think of a very traditional, old-fashioned kind of marionette stage, right? And the brain is the guy up there with the little thing, but all you're seeing is the marionette, right? All you're seeing is the puppet down below that. And it's kind of like that really is the thing. And you can kind of, you can infer the brain from the response.
Yes.
Right. But you really can't touch it directly. You can't get behind that screen. It still is slightly mysterious back there doing what it does to control things. Because so much of it's unconscious and so much of it is things that really have to be unconscious. Because, as I always say, like a tiny bit of our world is conscious and the rest is all happening without our control. Thank God, because otherwise we'd be dead in a minute.
Yeah, we would. Oh yeah.
If you had to breathe all night and stay awake to breathe all night, you'd be doomed. That would be it.
Yeah.
And I think that I love that sort of thought process too, because when someone first starts something, if you ever have worked with a marionette, it's a very difficult
really
thing
hard.
to try and get
Really
things
hard.
going.
Yeah.
And that's how, when you see clients for the first time do an exercise, it's sort of, you want me to do what? You want me what?
Yeah.
And you can see that question in their head. But over time, the movement gets smoothed out and you can really see that you're creating a much stronger mind body connection that goes from that sort of, I have to focus with every ounce of my being just to do this one thing, to now it's more natural and things become much more fluid and that relationship becomes much easier between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that.
I've got one more puzzle that I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah.
And that also emerged from some of the research that I was studying. And it's that there's a lot of work by a woman named Wolf, and she's out of Nevada, University of Nevada. And she talks all about how external cues, which are not interoception, which are like, if you want to improve someone in sports to get the ball into the basket, the last thing you want to tell them is to slide their shoulders down. And because you're focusing their body internally, which does not help them get the ball into the basket. And the first time I read that research, I had a real problem with it, because I'm a Pilates instructor and I'm all about getting people to feel their bodies.
Yeah.
That is what I do. It might not always be direct, but in my mind, when I'm trying to create change in the body, I got to get them to feel the change and then they make the change. So so it kind of butted up against my sense of like, no, it's so good to teach interoception. No, it's so good to teach to know where your body is. Like, how dare you say that that's not how it is? Like, essentially, I was like, I really was challenged by the science. But with science, we have to say, okay, well, this is the science. So I'm not teaching people. I admit I haven't been on many sports. Came from dance, but I did some soccer when I was young. But so what that made me realize, though, and this is what I teach a lot in one of the things I teach within the body awareness course, is that you need to, if somebody is struggling to find their sense of body awareness, because that's my goal, is to teach body awareness, usually, not always, but if that's my goal, asking them to just feel their body is like telling them to jump into the ether. Like there's nothing to grab onto, right? There's nothing for their brain to grab onto.
It can be too non-specific.
Yeah. So then you go into the external environment. I'm really wishing I had a poll, but I'm not in a Pilates studio right now. So a lot of times, like I had a brick wall in my old Pilates studio, and I would tell when in side lying leg series to get them to do abduction, I'd be like, go up a brick, go down a brick, go up a brick, go down a brick. Now that you know that goal, now translate that goal into what it feels like into your body, so that they would use the external environment to do, okay, well, no, your shin's not pointing the right way. Turn your shin to the floor, right where the chair is meeting the rug. Like, then I would say, now feel that. So I was trying to say, how can I take this research and then implement it to improve body awareness? Because I was like, there has to be a way.
Well, I want to take this in a different direction too.
Because
I was listening to something like Andrew Huberman podcast, and he's talking about a guy that does imagery work.
Okay.
But, and this was really significant, he was talking about imagery about a very small thing, like hitting a golf ball or shooting a basket, like a kind of a 1-2 movement. And I was thinking, like, okay, that's interesting, because it's talking about the effectiveness of, like visualizing. First of all, you have to have the experience of the positive movement, the effective movement, and then you have to reinforce that experience. If you've never hit the ball in the basket, then don't visualize yourself doing it, because you're going to not be patterning the right thing. That's kind of where that went. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because that is goal-oriented and performance-oriented in specific ways, which many sports are: soccer, baseball, football, basketball, etc. Then I think about something like dance or circus arts. Okay. And I really do think of different activities, right? I think of like triathlete sports. I think of like hitting, throwing sports. And I think of more whole body sports, like some martial arts, dance, etc. If you're a martial artist, or you're a dancer, or you're a circus arts person, you need to know where your body is at all times, and whether consciously or unconsciously. And you are using many, many, many different skills in any activity that you're doing. So in that case, like, yeah, you want to, let's say you're a trapeze artist, you want to basically let go of the trapeze and grab one of that guy's hands. That's only one tiny piece of what you're doing. Or you're a dancer, you want to jump and go a certain height or whatever, but then there's all the other stuff you have to do. So that's where I feel like that only external cues really breaks down when you're doing a sport or an activity that is much more internal. Right? Because the feedback in dance is how your body feels in space. Right? And maybe there's partnering, or you've got, you're spotting on certain points, but the feeling is not, I got the ball in the basket. The feeling isn't even, I got my leg this high. The feeling is, what does it feel like to get my leg this high with the rest of the body organized? So I would kind of question that premise of being so purely externally oriented, because that's not my experience as a longtime dancer, gymnast, ice skater. Like, I wasn't about, like, yes, it was about getting my leg there, but it was about how I got my leg there. So I think that's a really different way of being in the body that does involve more body awareness, or a different kind of body awareness, I will say.
Yes. And so when I'm working with clients who have not come from a dance background, right? It's like, how do you get someone who hasn't practiced as their brain was developing in childhood? Yeah. To then say, I have an 86-year-old father, and unfortunately he has really come into some postural problems. Sort of the scoliosis came about later in life, and trying to get him to understand body awareness, it's like, you got to love him, but like, how do you get people to find that when they don't? Or there's some other smoke. There's a smoke of fear or of pain, or I think that's where I get excited about that intersection. But
I think a lot of this, sorry to jump in, but I think a lot of this also goes down to, it's very specific. Like you said, there's different types of movement. If your ultimate goal is the end result, hitting a golf ball, swinging, and actually, if you're playing baseball, actually being able to hit the ball with the bat. I can work all day long on turning their hips. I can work all day long on getting them to turn their thoracic and follow through and all of that. But if their eye contact is not good and they cannot put that ball on the bat and that's not their focus, they're never going to hit it. Even though their swing may look beautiful, it's not the end result. So I think a lot of it has to come down to very goal specific, performance specific, because like you said, what I think we do is, and I tell this to people all the time, I'm a terrible golfer, but I can make you a much better golfer than you currently am by what I do, because I can break things down. I can make you a better mover. I can make you more efficient and more, effortless, movement patterns. But that, eighth of a tenth of a second where that ball strikes the club, I can't do anything about that. And I think that there's something to be said about that our focus has to lie on, when we're talking about, that connection. And I think it's very sport specific, just in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah. That's kind of my point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I think about somebody like, and I think about these sports in different ways. Like I think about triathlete sports, running, biking, swimming, repetitive, right? Like you can picture your stroke 100,000 times, like you can't do that. But those are about repetition, about endurance, about cardiovascular stuff, about form that is most efficient. They're very different, like that versus, running, throwing, hitting sports versus more gymnastic sports are just really different in terms of how the body and the brain work.
Yeah.
So anyway, cool. All right.
Well, this was a pretty, very deep dive at times into sort of the mind-brain connection. Thank you so much, Em, for joining us. We really appreciate it. How can people get in touch with you? What can they do to find out more about your work? And if they want to pursue this in their own practice, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a wonderful, what's called a Pilates brain visual poster that you can download that really talks about all of the areas in the brain and how specifically teaching Pilates is connected to that. So what I'll do is I will drop the link for that download. And that's a great place to get started with me.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
and we'll definitely put that in.
Information. Yeah, send us all your information. We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
I will. Thank you so much, Nora. It's such a pleasure to meet you, Brian.
You too. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, hit that like and subscribe button. We appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so movingconvos@gmail.com. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.